By all accounts, this new Surface Pro is a great product, Cory.
Sure, day one it always is. We'll see how the product works out, but Surface has been an interesting success for Microsoft. I think, under the radar. You know, when Surface first launched, it was a real disaster. They pumped it aggressively, but in fact, when sort of subsequent quarters after the release were out, we found that many of the Surfaces were removed. They were, when they talked about how many they had sold, they talked about products sold in inventory, not actually sold to consumers. But over time, this product has become successful and grown through no small effort of a giant marketing effort from Microsoft. Nonetheless, it's probably about a $2 billion a year business right now. But last quarter, you really saw sales slough off. Some of the devices were getting a little long in the tooth. So this update is certainly needed as evidenced by the results in the first quarter that showed about a 25% decrease on a year-over-year basis of hardware revenues for the new Surface.
Yeah, and I mean, Microsoft, we think of as primarily a software company. How exactly important is hardware to Microsoft?
You know, I think this really shows you how tough Satya Nadella's job is, how he's really threading the needle with the historic efforts of Microsoft, including some massive failures, as well as trying to turn the business towards areas where it can have greater success and greater profit margins. Of course, you know, hardware margins are never going to be what software margins can be. But the disastrous acquisition by Steve Ballmer as CEO of Nokia looms large for this company. They took an $8 billion write-off from that acquisition. Again, $8 billion write-off. That's just a massive screw-up by Microsoft. Satya Nadella was stuck with this sort of efforts in hardware. You could have easily seen a company that had had such great success in software completely abandon hardware. No one would have blamed him for that. But instead, what they figured out with the Surface is a way to do two things. Have success selling a device, and it's been a very successful device, with some interesting innovations, not least of which the pen and the device, but also sort of lead the way for other companies to come out and try to innovate using Microsoft software. So they're both, it's this notion of co-opetition, frenemies, a very Silicon Valley concept of you're working with customers who are also trying to beat you to death. And we certainly see that with the Surface, where they're really inspiring products out of HP, out of Dell, out of Lenovo and others who are building products to compete with the Surface, but being inspired by the innovations that Microsoft is showing them on the hardware side.
Cory, why announce this in China? It was Beijing that was the host conference, if you like, for the unveiling.
Yeah, this is very unusual, but I think it shows not just the success that Microsoft has had in China, but how the success that they haven't had in China. And that China is a place where really they can move the needle the most, where they can really start to sell in much bigger numbers, even though they're already doing well in China. And I think that this really shows that focus on that marketplace, that there's so much growth to be had still in China, and they think Surface can be a product that will lead the way for other Microsoft products.
Cory, I have to ask you a quick one about this idea that Nokia and Apple have settled all of their patent, outstanding disputes. And the way it got settled is that Nokia gets a little bit of space in Apple stores.
Yeah, we'll see how effective that space is and how that's policed. But it's an interesting way. Obviously, Nokia had the upper hand there because it's not something Apple is willing to give up very readily. But I think that this is probably a cheap way for Apple to get out of this thing, and conserving cash for whatever reasons is something Apple continues to want to do, even though they have the biggest cash piles of just about any company out there.